everyone, welcome back to my kitchen. Today is pasta making day. We love our homemade egg noodle pasta, so that's what we'll be making today. And then for supper, I'm actually going to make Vareniki, which is a Ukrainian dumpling kind of thing. I'm going to be filling them with homemade cottage cheese that I made yesterday. So come along and I'll share my day with you. Now I could make egg noodles with using the traditional method of just mixing eggs and flour, but I like to use my wash machine. I am making quite a large recipe and these dry great. So I'm going to show you my drying process later on, but for now let's start with the eggs. If you can get eggs locally, I highly recommend that. This will help give your dough a golden color and will give you more yellow egg noodles. Many small farms let their hens roam around pecking at grass bugs and other stuff, and this leads to eggs that are higher in omega-3 fatty acids and also vitamins A and E, which we can all agree we need more of. So this recipe calls for 13 eggs, 1 tablespoon of salt, and 1/4 cup of water. I'm adding these to my mixture and then I'll add a whole bunch of flour to make the noodles. Now I would like to make this with freshly milled flour, but that can be a bit of a challenge to work with, and I am still learning the ins and outs of that. So for today, all-purpose flour is what I used. This wash machine is a workhorse in my kitchen, and when it comes to making pasta dough, it works really well. Pasta dough needs to be mixed very thoroughly, and because it is such a hard dough, it can be hard on your hands. This machine definitely helps. Letting the dough rest for a few hours is super important. It helps the dough form shape better, and it's just much more enjoyable to work with. This took me several years to learn. I often just made the dough just before I wanted to make the noodles, and it caused me so much grief. Once I started letting it rest in the refrigerator for 2 hours or overnight, it became a lot easier to work with. Next, I mixed together my Vareniki dough. It is a slightly different recipe than the egg noodle pasta, although the recipes are similar. The recipe I was using for Vareniki contains milk, less eggs, and flour. You also separate the yolks and the white. The egg white goes into the dough and the yolks go into the cottage cheese. This is my husband's top favorite meal. I don't make it often enough, but with having fresh cottage cheese in the fridge, I decided today was a good day. I used to strongly dislike making these. For some reason, everything went chaotic when I made these, but then I learned that letting the dough rest in the refrigerator for a few hours made a huge difference. This somehow makes the dough a lot more manageable. So this is my noodle drying setup. I have a clothes dryer with a clean bed sheet spread underneath it, and I'm going to be hanging my noodles on this rack to dry. When I got back to my kitchen a few hours later, it was time to make the noodles. A pasta machine can be a help, but it's not necessary. All that is required is a lot of rolling to make the dough super thin and a sharp knife for cutting. a noodle machine does help to cut very thin noodles. I roll each piece of dough 3 or 4 times before cutting into noodles. The thickness of your dough will translate into thin or thick noodles. Making noodles is a family affair when making such a large recipe. We've at times made 4 times this amount, but it's exhausting. I prefer making smaller batches and then just making them more often. I recommend working quickly to prevent the dough from drying out too much before the noodles have been cut. Dried pieces of dough form cracked edges, which aren't the best. Once the noodles were cut, it was time to make Vareniki. I started off using the pasta roller, but my dough ended up being too soft, so I switched to rolling by hand. Each pocket gets filled with cottage cheese filling and set aside. When boiling these, drop each Vareniki into boiling water, stirring carefully to prevent sticking. Bring to a boil and cook for 5 minutes. Be very careful not to break them. They're quite soft and they tend to break very easily. We eat these with cream gravy and strawberries with a side of sausage. It might be an odd dish for some, but we love them. Have you tried them? They're enjoyed by most of us here in our home. Air drying egg noodles works really well. You need to dry them in a dry spot for about 24 hours. You will be able to feel that they crack really easily. That's when you know that they are ready to be put into storage. Break them into bags or buckets like I am doing. They keep well in the pantry for up to 6 months. If you won't use them in that time, I recommend storing them in the freezer. This will help keep them safe to eat for up to a year. Always cook your noodles and rinse them before adding them to your homemade chicken noodle soup. Have you made your own egg noodles before? If you want the recipe, let me know in the comments and I'll send it your way.